Hello and welcome to Bibliophile series episode 36. This was a not a funny article, but something that tickled my fancy, and I thought again this is slightly dated. I think 2014 something, written by Matt Soniak, and this is about pigeons. In India, we don't have as much hatred for pigeons, but somehow in the Western countries, pigeons are labeled as rats with wings. So this article is about as why the Western world, but because it is written by a Westerner, it is from his perspective why we dislike pigeons or why we have hatred for pigeons. Fun article. Let's go through it. In 2005, sociologist Colin Gerolmack went to Greenwich Village to study how New Yorkers use the neighborhood's pocket parks. Okay. What they wanted from these tiny green spaces and how they thought the parks could be improved. He got an answer to that last question almost immediately. Literally, the first day that I showed up to Father Demo Square, a pigeon crabbed on me, he says. In the parks and at community meetings, people told Gerolmack over and over that pigeons are the biggest gripe with the parks. Okay. Now, see, the groundwork has been laid. In 2005, this fellow went to Greenwich Village, a region in New York, how the New Yorkers were using these pocket parks. Pocket parks is within high rises, within all the construction that is happening, small pockets where parks are built. So pocket parks, small pockets where parks are built. So they get labeled as pocket parks, and how they can be efficient, how they can fulfill the needs and aspirations of the people, and how those parks can be improved. He got an answer to that last question almost immediately, and then it is referenced. The first day that he visited such a park, Other Demo Square, a pigeon crabbed on him. So the pigeon, in India, we call it, the pigeons gave him their blessing. But okay. In the parks and community meetings, people told Gerolmack over and over again that pigeons were the biggest gripe with the parks. They hated pigeons. Pigeons were the biggest problem that they were facing. This is not a complaint unique to Greenwich Village or to New York City. Around the world, we've criminalized feeding pigeons, shot them, poisoned them, trapped them, zapped them, fed them birth control, and used all manner of repellents, from plastic birds of prey to spike strips to keeping these rats with wings off of sidewalks, statues, and buildings. See, the attitude towards pigeons. The attitude towards pigeons is that of a very hostile nature. We want to control them. We want to keep them away. Basically, what most people feel towards snakes and alligators, as in you don't want any interaction with them, they creep you out. Pigeons are also evoking similar response in the Western world, which should be fun, or at least I find it funny. From the Indian perspective, pigeons are okay. Pigeons are pigeons, but it's not like we hate them with this much gusto. We waged war against pigeons, an essentially harmless enemy that has earned a level of scorn puzzlingly disproportionate to their crimes. We have uneasy, sometimes combative relationships with other pests and nuisance animals, some of which are more destructive and dangerous. But the pigeon is absolutely despised. The level of hate that pigeon gets compared to other pests and other nuisance animals that cause more damage is humongous. Pigeons are absolutely despised. The full scope of our disdain and distrust for birds is impossible to quantify, writes journalist John Muallem. It's hard even to explain. Okay. We cannot really measure how much we hate the birds here being pigeons, and it's even hard to explain. Gerolmack's research on sociology of cities and human-animal interactions, set in motion by the pigeon poop out of the blue. Pigeon poop being first day he visited and pigeon pooped on him. Set in motion by that pigeon poop out of the blue has led him to a potential explanation. One that has more to do with us than with the birds. More than making a racket or pooping on park benches and people, Gerolmack says the problem with pigeons is the way we think about them. And the greatest sin is simply being out of place in our minds. Their greatest sins. Understand why this is about pigeons. When this is about pigeons, this is essentially the theory. This is essentially the reason why there exists racism and xenophobia in this world. In your own interpretation, in your own expectation of how the world should be like, if there is an external party that does not fit your description of the world, there are hostile feelings that come up that you don't fully understand, then you justify it by saying, okay, they're taking away our jobs, they are uncouth, they are ruining our population, they're ruining our blood pool. You can say all of those things. But the entire point is, in your conception of the world, if something is amiss, somebody who is not a part of that world, or in your expectation of that world, if that person becomes a part, that is when you start delineating them and antagonizing them. And then that is how racism and xenophobia starts in the first place. But of course, for purposes of this article, think this has more to do with why pigeons don't are not a part of our general conception of the world, and that is their greatest sin. That is the greatest gripe we have against them. While we may not know it, that is definitely the greatest gripe we have against them. Okay. Not long after he was crapped on, Gerald Mack combed through 155 years worth of New York Times articles, tracking the conversation the city was having with itself about pigeons and trying to figure out how and why birds got labeled as pests. Pigeons are labeled as pests there. These birds, pigeons are labeled as pests. Now, pests are an invasive species that, as in India, we call pests something that would ruin your crops. You would call pests that something ruins the agricultural produce. But even birds here have gotten labeled as pests. We found that while pigeons have been our neighbors in cities for thousands of years, they were problematized only recently, going from innocent bird to mundane nuisance to public enemy in just a few decades. So their evolution, as in the villain arc, has been very, very fast. They went from being an innocent participant of the public life to becoming public enemy in just a few decades. The early mention of pigeons in the paper of record from the late 19th century are actually sympathetic to them, condemning the sport of pigeon shooting. Early in the next century, opinions shifted. Pigeons became a nuisance through the 1930s and 40s, nesting and defecating in and on landmarks, statues, and sidewalks. Gerald Mack writes in his paper how pigeons became rats, the cultural spatial logic of problem animals. This is the paper that Gerald Mack has written. Okay. In the 1950s, we learned that pigeons carry disease. In 1963, they were framed by several officials as menacing vermin to be exterminated. Now, vermin is as in insects and animals living in ground, covered in filth, carrying a lot of diseases. Rats are called vermins, but even these pigeons have got this label, vermins. Okay. In all of these articles, Gerald Mack found concrete reasons for New Yorkers to be annoyed by pigeons. Feces, noise, links to disease. But to him, they didn't add up to a satisfactory explanation for the loathing they receive. They're certainly noisy, and they defecate on people and property with abandon and in great volume. A pigeon produces a hefty 25 pounds of excrement per year. But you can say the same about a lot of animals. See, when we say pigeon is bad because of this, because of this, because of this, the reasons are attributable to other animals as well. Yet pigeon gets a lot of hate, the others don't. That is the puzzle that Gerald Mack is trying to resolve. The threat of pigeon-borne diseases could explain our hatred, but there is not much of a threat to speak of. Though the Times reported that one New York City with health official had linked two deaths to the diseases carried by pigeons, neither the New York Department of Health nor the Centers of Disease Control and Prevention could confirm any cases of people getting sick from casual interactions with the birds. So there have been rumored deaths, as in deaths that have been rumored to be caused by pigeons. It has not been confirmed. It has not been confirmed. And see how the claim is being challenged. One New York City health official had linked One New York City health official had linked the Department of Health or the CDC, Central of Disease Control and Prevention. Neither of the official bodies that are supposed to give out reports, they made any reference to this. So one random person in one office has made this statement, does not really lead to a substantiation or undisputed proof. An epidemiologist at the CDC told him that people and pigeons rarely interact in ways in which the birds could make us sick. Epidemiologists are people who study epidemics. We live in a day and age where epidemic is no longer uh, as in, we know pandemic, something that stretches. Epidemic is widespreading disease, but constrained within a region. Pandemic is when it spreads outside of that region. Pandemic, epidemic, same disease-based treatment. So epidemiologists at CDC told him peoples and pigeons rarely interact in ways in which pigeons can potentially cause sickness to humans. Okay. If none of the pigeons' natural characteristics could explain why we hate them so much, Gerald Mack figured, then the issue isn't anything that pigeons do, but how we see them and the spaces we share with them. The pigeon as a pest, this idea, this notion, pigeon is a pest, he thinks, is a symptom of people's idea that environments we build are separate from natural ones. In what sociologists call our imaginative geography of cities, there's a border that separates clean, orderly civilization and wild, uncontrolled nature. That doesn't mean there is no nature, but ideally, the city is the place where we invite nature in ways that we control. Gerald Mack says. Essentially, what he's getting at is, in most people's head, they have an expectation of what the civil life, the civilized world would look like in spaces, in city-based spaces, in urban spaces. They expect this is what would happen, completely forgetting that these urban spaces are still a part of nature and there are still going to be participants who don't really fall in line with the established rules and customs that we expect them to. We cut out little squares in the concrete, and that's where the trees belong. We don't like it when grass and weeds begin to grow through cracks in the sidewalks, because that's nature breaking out of those boundaries that we want to keep it in. Again, linking it to the earlier idea of racism. Can you see? We have an expectation of what it should be like. If there is a difference in the actuality versus our expectation, whatever that difference is, it causes us frustration, anger, negative emotions rise up. Okay. Pigeons cross those boundaries frequently and visibly, inhabiting the spaces we think of as our own. More than most other urban animals, they prefer concrete and sidewalks and ledges over grass and shrubs. Gerald Mack says. Rats will retreat to sewers and bushes and remain out of view. But pigeons invade the spaces that we've designated for people. So in our head, the spaces that were supposed to be used by human beings and by no other animal, pigeons have invaded those spaces. They have become a part of that space, and that is why we end up despising pigeons as much as we do. By upsetting our imaginative geography, pigeons show us that cities are not as subdued and scrubbed of nature as we think they should be, or as we expect them to be. Our expectation, nature is nature, and then the civilized world is civilized world, forgetting that the civilized world, wherever you have construction and everything, is still part of nature. Natural beings can and will come there. Those transgressions alone are enough to raise our ire. But because authorities and experts have connected the birds to disease, pigeons don't just invade our space, they potentially pollute it. Marked as an epidemiological threat, despite actually being poor vectors of disease, poor vectors, poor carriers of disease. They don't carry as much disease, they don't cause as much disease as despite being marked as a epidemiological threat. Pigeons have also become a health menace in people's mind. Again, see, the thing that you have negative emotions for, so you label it as something dangerous, and then even if the death rate is not as high, even if the death rate is not as high, or we harm caused rate is not that high because it becomes popular, because it gets that name, then it starts selling. This is also the funda behind a lot of marketing goods. Let's say 20 years ago, no one cared if you have a different face cream and you have a different body lotion. There was a cream by the name of Boro Plus, Boroline. You use that on face, you use that on your body, all of that was fine. But now for face, there is a different cream. Now under eyes, there is a different cream. Then on palm, there is a different cream. Then on hands, there is a different cream. All of this has not been generated. It's not like these items, there was a need for them. It is when you start labeling things and saying, okay, this cream is for usage for the under eye so that you don't have, what is it called? Dark eyes, black eyes, something is dark circles. You don't have dark circles. Then for the T zone, you need to have a different sort of cream. Then for your palm, you need to have a different sort of cream. Most middle class households will tell you everywhere Boroline works. Even when you have like a cut or a bruise, Boroline works. You don't really need new, because Boroline is an antiseptic cream. So it works. But then with more specialization, with more demarcation and giving names to certain needs, ooh, new things have been uh, created and have been sold. So here, what I'm linking it to, as soon as you label these pigeons as an epidemiological threat, despite them not really causing as much disease, in the head of people, oh, they also cause disease. They also cause disease. I'll come back to the racism parallel here as well. Think, as in, when you see news coverage for a certain group, if for a certain group you want to evoke negative emotions, you'll say one Muslim man killed this, and that. When it's a Hindu person and you don't want to evoke similar emotion, you won't say one Hindu man killed such and such person. One man, one misguided youth, something of that nature. Or let's say in India, it could turn ugly. So Muslim, Hindu, I don't want to get into too much detail of that. But then let's say in US, when they have a migrant crisis, they have a migrant crisis. Migrants, on an average, contribute the more to the growth of the nation than the average resident American does. And migrants, on an average, commit lesser crimes than average resident American does. Yet, if you turn to Fox News, that has a very hard anti-migrant stance. Every news, see, this migrant does this. This migrant has done this. This migrant has done this. Migrants are a menace. Migrants cause crime. They frame the issue in such a way. That we always end up thinking, oh, crime rate is going up and crime is everything is happening poorly because of migrants. But the data would show otherwise. Most migrant families, most migrants in US, on an average, uh, cause lesser crime than natural residents or natural citizens of America. But the fun is, if we frame it that way, that is the message we send out. A lie repeated 100 times somehow gains a modicum of truth. That is what happens. This is the idea behind. If we label them an epidemiological threat in heads of people, oh, these animals cause disease, these animals cause disease, these animals cause disease. If you look at it, dogs versus pigeons, dogs causes far more pain, but dogs are still pets. Dogs are still tameable. They are domesticated. Pigeons are not domesticated. And pigeons are also labeled as an epidemiological threat. Pigeons are bad. If that's the way we think about pigeons, then when you look around and you see that they're everywhere, they can become potentially terrifying. Gerald Max says. The urban terror was given a new name in June 1966 when New York City Parks Commissioner Thomas coined the term rats with wings. With that, Gerald Max says pigeons were explicitly linked to disorder and disease, and our perceptions of them as nuances, dirty animals, and health threats were all emphasized and threaded together in a neat little package. This is also the importance of marketing and branding. Of course, the pigeons don't have any representative, any PR rep that can speak on their behalf. But once you get branded as rats with wings, and rats come with all the added idea of being dirty, living in sewers, carrying a lot of diseases. So if pigeons are rats with wings, your brand has been inextricably linked with bad attributes. Rats with Wings soon went mainstream. It popped up in Woody Allen's 1980 film Stardust Memories and appeared in almost every article written about pigeons after 1990 that Gerald Mack looked at. See, branding is a powerful tool, an absolutely powerful tool. Not just in the Times, but in 51 other papers from around the country in language that claimed consensus. Basically, everybody was calling pigeons rats with wings. The pigeons had ascended from minor annoyance, Gerald Mack says, to a symbol of what we find vile and morally repugnant in the urban cityscape. Bad reputation can be hard to shake, but a bad reputation can be hard to shake. But as urban wildlife becomes more noticeable, better researched by scientists, and even celebrated by urbanites, the pigeon's image might get a little bit of rehabilitation. For biologists who study the novel ecosystems of cities, pigeons are exciting and interesting because they've adapted so well to cities. Gerald Mack says that that view may trickle out into the mainstream. See, for example, the hot take that pigeons are underrated. They don't get as much appreciation as they deserve. What's more, our imaginative geography of urban areas is shifting. We're witnessing a moment in cities where they're trying to encourage connections with nature and urban wildlife. And the idea of a city as a place where nature is not is changing, Gerald Mack says. See, this paragraph is about how things are changing for the better. Although very, very minutely, but things are changing for the better towards the perception of pigeons. This paragraph is switching the tone. Prior to this, it was all about why pigeons are not viewed favorably and why their life is a mess. But this paragraph or this second last paragraph is giving us a little glimmer of hope. This probably won't lead to major rebranding of pigeon as an urban darling. They are, after all, feral descendants of domestic birds that escape. For many people, Gerald Mack says, they don't even count as real wildlife. They don't even count as real wildlife. Still, their image may at least soften. I think that pigeons will look more like other, look more, I think that pigeons will look more like other animals that historically we have liked and had more affection for, he says. And that could lead to people at least having a little bit more tolerance for them. I hope you understand why this article is entirely about pigeons. There is a beautiful undercurrent of outsiders coming to your region and the degree of acceptance that they have, the negative attributes that we assign to them not having a voice, not being able to defend what and who they're doing. The stuff that they do is being done by others also, yet they are the ones who get blamed. They are the ones who become a part of our modern life. Slow acceptance of them and slow changes can potentially happen. But this is, I can see a direct parallel between racism and xenophobia with the way that pigeons have been treated in the Western world. Hopefully, you can also understand those parallels that I'm drawing. The statistical analysis of this article. The article length is 1269 words, 1269 words, 51 sentences. 14.72 is the 14.72 is the grade level, which indicates the text is very advanced in terms of readability, suitable for readers at college level. At college level, not 11th to 12th grade, at college level. Sorry for that. And then the reading score is 34.18, which means it has to be difficult to read, requiring a significant level of concentration and understanding. So, fun article. Again, this is also slightly, I think this is 2014 article written in 2014. Hopefully you understood the article. You also were able to draw the links that I was coming up with along the way. All of that helped. That will be all for this week's episode. Hopefully you understood stuff. Have fun. Okay, bye.